I don't know God. I don't understand his ways. Everyone here understand all of his ways? Crazy. Someday I'll figure it all out. Hey, last week was Father's Day. We had a great time. I went home and had lobster. It was awesome. And we try to do that. That's Cindy's roots in eastern Canada, so we try to do that a couple times a year. I'd do it a couple times a week if I could, but it was awesome, sitting out on a beautiful day, just eating lobster together. But I spoke last Sunday about Josiah. Josiah was this king that emerged in Judah that was 8 years old when he became king. And his father, Amon, A-M-O-N, he was an evil man, and his father was an evil man. The point was Josiah grew up in a culture that was totally bent toward evil. So much that when somebody brought the Torah to him, which you think, being the children of God, Jews, they would well know the Torah, but for generations they got separated from it. And now with the Word of God, the Bible, if we have generations that get separated from it, who knows what the fruit of that might be, you know. And so Josiah was in this moment where, long story short, a priest came and read him out of the Torah. And it so struck him, probably the first time in his life he'd heard it read out loud. It struck his heart, and he went on a campaign to destroy evil in the nation. And in those days, the way it was expressed were high places and altars of sacrifice and stuff like that. So he started tearing everything down. Everything that did not represent God, he tore down. And there was a lot of stuff that happened, which I referenced last week. And he was only, by that time, in his late teens, early 20s, when he started doing all those things. And I talked about how in our own hearts now, the passion, the vigilance that we would have toward tearing down strongholds that have emerged in our lives. So thinking about that, for 3 weeks now, I've wanted to preach this particular message because it's been on my mind. But every week I felt the Lord say, not now, not now, not now, but I felt the release this week. So I want to, if you could turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 14, 1 Corinthians 13, 1 Corinthians 13. And I want to ask you a couple questions. I want to ask you, first of all, do you know how to love well? And we hear that phrase in our circles a lot because Bethel, Redding, which is the mothership of our movement here in Redding, California, they use that phrase a lot. It's a great phrase, you know, I want to love well, I want to love well. Bob Jones introduced it to us probably a decade ago. He used it a lot. He talked about when he, in 1975, he actually died and went to heaven. And the Lord, if I remember the story right, the Lord spoke to him in heaven. You got to know Bob Jones really appreciate this, but the Lord spoke to him and said, "Did you learn how to love?" And he realized he had not learned how to love in those 40-some years or whatever it was at that point. So the Lord sent him back. So when he came back, he was like a Josiah. Tear down everything that does not represent love. He became a very loving man. He actually, oddly enough, more than a decade of preaching on love and have I loved well, he died on Valentine's Day. You know, it's just kind of a little smile from heaven, you know. It's just that way God does those things. But it's always stuck in my mind, the power of love. And I want to read you this passage because I want to talk about the things in our own lives that we need to deal with during this pandemic as things are being revealed in each one of us. I don't know about you, but you know, I've done a lot of thinking over the past few months, and because we've had time to do it. I've had alone time. Cindy and I have had time together, but we've also had a lot of alone time. I've learned how to be alone a lot more, and I'm learning to enjoy that. Aloneness can be a gift. You know, lonely is not a gift, but aloneness is a gift. Aloneness helps you discover God at an entirely new level. You hear his voice. I mentioned this illustration many times. You know, when I used to be a deer hunter, I go out in the woods, you get up in a tree somewhere. You hunt differently depending on where you are, but then we hunted, you go sit in a tree somewhere, you would get there before dawn, you would have your weapon of choice, whatever it was. I was a crossbow hunter, and I'd have my crossbow there, and the absolute stillness of the woods at night was unbelievable. You would hear things. Your hearing became so sharp in that stillness. You could hear a squirrel a mile away. I mean, it was just amazing. And you watched as the sun came up and everything started to come to life without them knowing that you're there. I mean, I had turkeys walk by me, foxes walk by me, not knowing I'm right there. So you blended into nature, and in that moment you could hear, you could discern in a way. And so I've learned a lot from that I've learned how to bring myself into a moment. And during the sicknesses that I've had in my life over the past 15 or so years, it's demanded aloneness. I've been taken places I didn't want to visit in myself. You know, I call it suchography. Suchography would be the geography of your soul. You know, what's really in there? And these moments do start churning up things that are inside of us, hidden anger, frustrations, resentments, whatever. Sometimes you get a little bit, I mean, the culture right now is so sensitive. You see, if you don't word things perfectly on social media, you get blasted, you know. And everyone, I mean, I had a guy yesterday warn me that I could be part of the revelation where it says in Revelation that you be accursed by the things I'm saying. I'm like, give me a break. You got to be kidding me. I've gone from stating something out of Scripture to becoming accursed. I mean, it's ridiculous. But that's where we are right now. And so you can put something on there and boom, they're going to be there. And then you get defensive and, you know, we're all about whether you're wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, you know, and there's legalists on both sides of that issue.
That's right.
Did you know that?
Yeah.
There's Pharisees with mask on, there's Pharisees without mask on. Jesus has called us to live in the love line in the middle. And so we're all saying, well, you know, it's a lack of faith if you wear a mask. We're going back and forth on all these things, you know. And the truth is, I ask anyone who says that to me, don't say it to me. Anyone who says it to me, that's not wearing a mask, I say, did you wear a seatbelt today on your way to church? Well, of course I did. It's the law. Why is it the law? Well, because it saves lives, you know, of course. Well, right now there's a whole lot of people in the medical community that believe that saves lives, so we're going to do that. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. If you do want to do that, that's fine. We've opened it up here in the church, but let's not judge one another. Yes. I mean, this is such a small thing in the bigger picture. And it's because now that wearing masks have become politicized. It's just, you know, the truth is, in Japan and Korea, and definitely in China, they've been doing this for decades. They have. I've been to all three of those places. I usually thought it was weird. Why is everyone wearing a mask? Part of it's because of pollution over there. You know, it's so bad, particularly in China. And so they wear masks. They're used to wearing masks. It's just not a big deal. So we don't need to judge one another in the midst of this. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because I'm asking the question, have we learned to live well? You know, when you find out that you're being invaded by stuff in your life, you want to take care of that. I mean, you know, every spring in our house, for some reason, we get invaded by ants. It's like a 3-week period. It's the same every year. It's like, please, you know, why are we doing this? You know, and they find their way in somehow, and you know, it's horrible. You know, we try to get rid of them, and they're coming in mass, and you're driving them out the door. You know, and we do everything we can because that's what you do when you're invaded like that. And there's all kinds of things that we've also, you know, at times in our life, when we were in Canada, we lived in a house that was over 150 years old. And so their basements back then were not great. They were like swimming pools, you know. And you get water in your basement, you freak out, especially in Ohio. You know, like, we got water in our basement. We're going to have to declare this on our sale when we sell it. You know, I mean, it freaks us out. We get probably overly freaked out on it, you know. But it's an invasion in our space, knowing that intrusion can cause great problems. That is happening right now culturally in every person's life. And we're learning how to push back with yet still moving in love, saying I'm a man or I'm a woman of love, but I'm getting wounded, I'm getting hurt. I mean, the big issue we have right now in America, the big wounding of the American soul is racism right now. I mean, it's been there, but it's what we're talking about right now. And so racism is a deep wound that was worldwide, by the way. Every culture in the world has had slaves. Every culture, even in Africa, they've all had slaves. So there's something in mankind that moves toward bringing other people in bondage and limiting freedoms. And so that's happening. And so now we're having to think a lot and what do I say? We're learning language that's more appropriate. It's good. It's really good. I mean, God hates racism. I hate racism. And so we're going to work toward that and make sure. This isn't a political thing. I think the Lord is in this thing. I really do. I believe the Lord is in this. He's instructing America. And I think if we can respond rightly in this without getting agitated about whether the T's are crossed or the I's are dotted, if we can give grace on both sides. I've told you my verse, I think it was last Sunday. My life verse is Romans 5:17. Through the abundance of grace and the gift of righteousness. Did you know in Jesus Christ, you've been gifted with righteousness? Turn to the person next to you who's 6 feet away and say, you're righteous. If you're a follower of Jesus Christ, you have a gift. It was given to you. You didn't work for it. You just received Jesus and you were gifted in righteousness. What that means is that you have right standing before God. That gift is a weapon. That gift is a tool. It can change your life. I mean, it can, the story of Israel coming out of Egypt, as Chris alluded to earlier, and then making it toward the promised land is the story of the Christian life. That's part of why it's illustrated in the Old Testament so that we might learn from it. There's times of wandering, there's times of provision, there's times of guidance, whatever it might be. It speaks to the Christian life. But it's interesting, the Lord promised them, that's why it's called the promised land. It's a promise in their future. And it really wasn't that far away. I think at one point it's like 70 miles or 80 miles, somewhere around there from where they were. But because of different things, it took them over 40 years to get there. Does that feel like anyone's life here? And so on the way there, it was the promise of God. But guess what? When they finally got into the promised land, they had to fight for the cities. So sometimes we say, well, Jesus will provide, Jesus provided it. I understand that. Of course, that's true biblically. But in the reality of day-to-day living, this is a partnership. Yeah. It's a partnership between heaven and earth. There's stuff you need to do. And you don't do it so that he'll love you. You do it because he loves you. Christopher, there's places you got to go and you got to speak up, or people are not going to know what they need to do. I mean, he does it in schools all over Ohio and in other places. He goes and he gives them a good life message, and he's very popular for it, and he touches souls and changes lives and gets people out of addictions and all kinds of things. It's a dispossessing of the promises of God. It's going into the promises and saying, well, we need to clean up here, and the Lord's called me in this place, so I'm going to move these things out right now. The problem is that promised land is in you. It's not just a geographical location. It's in your soul. That's where the promises of God are. They're there. You, in the power of the gift of righteousness and with the abundance of grace, the Bible says you reign in life through the one, Jesus Christ. So what you're doing is with Jesus, you're moving things out of your life because you want to love well. And some things inside of you and some things that are on you do not allow you to love well. Resentments, hurt, unforgiveness, offenses that come to us now like daily. If you're on social media, someone doesn't like your thing. Why didn't they like it? Someone says something, we just unfriend them or hide them or not unfollow them or what's the final one, the ultimate? How do we get rid of them? Block them. We block them. There's so many ways to offend people on social media. I'm going to unfriend you. See how that feels. And if you don't straighten up, I'm going to block you. This is the warfare dynamic emotionally that's going on, and people are feeling uptight and tense all the time. And then the pandemic is dropped in the middle of that. Do you understand why people are on edge? And there's riots in the street, and there's protests, and there's finances are wobbling all over the place, dropping 3,000 points in one day, back in March. And people are freaked out. They thought they were going to retire. Now they're not sure, their life savings. Some people I know lost hundreds of thousands of dollars, some millions of dollars, in one day. It's a freak out moment. And so I was thinking about that. And this verse came to my mind in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and I'm just going to read the first part of it. But Paul is speaking to the issue of love. And this is such a fascinating, it's really a template of everything in your life. And I'll show you that in just a minute. And then we're going to talk about offenses for a few moments. It says this in 1 Corinthians 13, verse 1, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels. So this is a good thing. In fact, these verses right here, I almost like to say they're written to a charismatic church. I mean, he's writing to people that speak in tongues of angels and men. He's writing to people that have gifts of prophecy, understands mysteries, can move mountains with faith. That's the people he's moving to. That's Bethel, Cleveland. You know, we believe that. We want to see those things happen. We've seen some of those things happen. So he's speaking to us. The scripture's for us. Actually, he's speaking in New Testament church because the entire New Testament church was charismatic, just saying. Verse 1 says, though I speak with tongues of men and angels, but have not love. This is shocking because I've been in ministry world for 42 years, and I hear people, I want to get in ministry. I'm like, well, you're in ministry. I mean, we're all called to minister. Yeah, but I want a church of my own, or I want a ministry of my own. I'm going to start, you're going to get a 501c3, and all these things that kind of stir up with people. And I just think, first work on your own soul. Work on the 1 Corinthians 13 that have we learned to love well, because you could get out there and see fruit because God honors faith. You could see fruit, but you could be messed up in your own soul. And so it says here, if you do that and you have not love, you become sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. That's not good. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, imagine that. We're big. I mean, we've been a prophetic church since day one. One of the first things I did when we started this church in 1996, a century ago, was gather about 30 people together up here at the Sleep Inn in one of their little rooms they have where you can teach and train, a little room like that. And I trained them in the prophetic. I trained them how to get words of knowledge, revelation from heaven, how to disperse that, how to speak to others. And we started our prophetic ministry teams, like in the first month, really, that we started all these years later and still have them now. Healing teams, prophetic teams. It's great. It's good to be on that. It's good to learn how to do those things. It's good to do it out in the street. But you can do all those things. And if you have not love, it says, and though I have all faith so that I can remove mountains, but have not love. There it is again. Have not love, I am nothing. This is scary stuff. Do you not agree? This is for us. We can do all these things. We can move in great power. I mean, God can actually move through you, see someone get healed. You get someone healed. It's amazing how when you pray for someone, they get healed, you feel special about it. As if it's us. We're the hose that he poured through. We're the conduit of God. He's made it that way where he wants us to exercise faith, and he will turn on the flow that goes into the person. But it's heady, though. It's heady when you pray for someone and boom, they're healed. It's heady when you prophesy over someone. They're like, wow, let me just show you this. I got this email yesterday about this new job. You just said this new job, and I mean, you literally named the name. I mean, that's amazing. And it's like, that's right. That's what I do. I get words of knowledge. I prophesy. Anyone wants anything else, just let me know. We can take care of that. When you see that happen, you're going to think, I'm just what's in my mind. I say, oh. When I feel that in my own heart, I know I'm stepping out of the circle of love. This is true. And I rebuke myself. And I say, get back into that circle, man. This isn't about you. It's about God moving through you. It's about Jesus Christ and everything that he does. See, you read through this, and Paul knows that he's speaking a very heavy thing right now. But look at verse 3. I bestow all my goods to feed the poor. See, we see in the church these themed emotional passions for a certain thing. I mean, the prophetic. Lord says, above all things, you should prophesy. Okay, yeah, that's true. But there's more to life than just prophesying. It's about healing the sick, man. We need to heal people. Jesus went about healing all. and doing good and healing all who are oppressed of the devil. We all know the verses that tag with what we believe. We need to minister to the poor. If we minister to the poor in the city, it would transform this whole city. Well, Paul's just saying, he's saying, you know what he's really saying in 21st century terms? We need to chill with our mask on or off, with prophesying or healing or whatever. We just need to realize it is Jesus who is doing this. And we are all the same, brothers and sisters, all colors, all backgrounds, skinny jeans, fat jeans, latte or a tea. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's always amazing how we can become very religious about what we believe and passionate. I tell Cindy it's charismatic terrorism. I mean, you blow everything up everywhere you go. Yeah, I don't believe that. Okay, well, that's fine. Calm down. You don't have to believe it. Believe your own thing. I tell people all the time, say whatever you want on your page. Go to it. I'm not going to read it, but go to it. If you want to read my stuff, yes, you can disagree with me, but don't get mean about it. Don't say that I'm accursed. I think I have a wound, Cindy. Anyway, it says here, I bestow all goods, feed the poor. I give my body to be burned. What could be bigger than that? There was a time in the 5th or 6th century that it was cool to get martyred. Guys literally put themselves in the roles where they could get martyred because there was something special about martyrdom. It gave you a special place in heaven. I mean, you imagine that? I just want to be a martyr. That's what I want to do. That's what they did for several centuries. After a while, we realized, hey, if it happens, it happens, but I'm not going to provide a situation where I'm martyred. So he's speaking and saying, give your body to be burned, which you think would be a big deal, but if I have not love, it profits me nothing. Then he defines love, and this is so powerful. He says, love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up. It does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in truth. This verse 7 is really hard. Bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things, love never fails. I don't know about you, when I read that, I'm like, oh, Jesus, am I in love or am I out of love? I'm doing stuff, but Lord, am I centered in you? I know I talk to people all the time about this kind of stuff, and they go, well, of course you are. The Lord loves you, and he gave his life for you, and he shed blood. I get all that. But in myself, I'm in my promised land. There are things in my life that I've got to dispossess and I can do that because of Jesus Christ, who's the one over me through the abundance of grace and gift of righteousness. I need to take care of my stuff. And we have stuff that's not in love. You know, it's really good. We've used this for years. I've used it. I haven't seen anyone else do it, but I'm sure there's probably a million others that do. I've used this as a template for all the gifts. So, you know, you can insert, instead of love, put prophecy in there. Prophecy suffers long and is kind. I like kind prophecy. In the 80s, we had a lot of unkind prophecies. Everyone was in a judgmental mood in the 80s. I love Cheon. He said 80s was from Hades. I mean, it was a tough time. I'm calling people out, calling sins out, things like, I mean, you don't need a prophet to call sins out. We all know what our sins are. I mean, there's always hidden sins, but, you know, just hang out for a while and you're like, oh, they need help. You hang out with me a while ago, he needs help. He's one sick puppy, man. He needs some help. So we see those imperfections. There's no gift in finding imperfections. In fact, the most gifted one at that, he's called the accuser of the brethren. He points to people and says, you are nothing. You will be nothing. You'll never amount to anything. Once you understand I have the gift of righteousness, it changes everything. Now you use that gift. I mean, I'm around people that say things like, oh, no, you don't have to do anything. I'm in the power of the shed blood of Jesus Christ over you. I understand that. But he gave it to us so that we can learn to become overcomers. He gave it to us to dispossess the enemy that is in our promised land. And in this promised land, there are enemies of my soul that I need to dispossess and get them out of the promised land. So you could throw prophecy in there. You could throw healing in there. You know, to train people, you could say, hey, ministering to somebody on a ministry team does not behave rudely. That means you're not pushing people down. You're not touching people in ways that are inappropriate. You're sensitive, does not seek its own. You're not there, hey, everyone's falling down when I pray for them, but I notice that everyone else, nothing's happening. I mean, we don't say those things. Some people do say those things. We don't say those things. We think those things. I'm the man of God. I'm the woman of God. I'm moving in power. You need to get my latest book. You need to read my blog. It's going to change your life. It's like, where did all that come from? It's kind of hellish. Heaven is a little different. Heaven is the embracing of the nature of Christ, and it's love. So now you got to put everything in there. You have to put your relationships in here. Let's just do that for a minute to make it worse. Marriage suffers long and is kind. Marriage does not envy. Marriage does not parade itself. Marriage is not puffed up. Marriage does not behave. It's love in marriage. This is the one that really blows my mind, is put your name in there. Steve suffers long and is kind. In fact, put your name in there and read it out loud. It feels weird. Steve suffers long and is kind. I got to say, well, heck, sometimes. Steve does not envy. Except when my friend got that really nice car, Aston Martin, it was beautiful. Steve does not parade himself. I hope not. Steve is not puffed up. There are gluten issues. 5. Steve does not behave rudely. No comment. Steve is not provoked. Steve thinks no evil. Steve does not rejoice in iniquity. Steve rejoices in truth. This is the big one. Steve bears all things. Steve believes all things. Steve hopes all things. Steve endures all things. Steve never fails. Now you put your name in there and you're like, oh, but I need more of that grace. I need like abundance of grace to go. Why? Because I had issues. I brought my issues with me. I want to show you. I worked on these the other day. Yeah, I got this one. I do have one big issue too. I brought it. But here's my issues. I put a whole bag of them in here. So I just grabbed one here. Let's see. Sarcasm. You know, when someone speaks to you with sarcasm, if it's biting sarcasm, you know, some sarcasm when it comes because you know the person, you have a bridge of relationship built with them. I'm talking about love right now. A bridge of relationship built with them, you can go, they were just kidding, and you get rid of it. But sometimes someone says something, you think, there was an element of truth in what they said. Do they really think that about me? And you go home, and it's fascinating because like with sarcasm, you can go home and say, you can start, I remember Larry Lee taught this years ago, great prayer warrior general of the 80s, you know, he said, you can nurse it, you can rehearse it, and you can curse it. And so you nurse this thing like, I can't believe he said that to me. Like, does he really believe that about me? Does he think I'm weird? Like, now this person who's spoken sarcasm may have no thought about what they said to you. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but they may have no thought, but you're nursing this thing. Someone told me that I didn't have that ability. I know I do. Why do they say that? I understand why they said that, you know, and it just doesn't make sense. But, you know, I don't, did I say something to them? Why would they even say that? I mean, we go through all this self-talk in our minds. We're nursing it, we're rehearsing it. And we can even go to the point of cursing it and say, that guy's, he's going to be judged by God because he said that thing to me. I mean, it doesn't have to be a big thing. But now I'm wearing it. In fact, when you get with me, you can see it, some of you. That guy's been influenced by something. He's been hurt by sarcasm. He's insecure. Something's going on. Look at that thing on him. And by the way, if I open my coat, you'd see there's all kinds of hidden ones too. But this is the one that's out in the open, where you could see this and say, there's a problem there with sarcasm. Sarcasm, what do you do? Well, the Bible gives us some understanding of what we do for some of these. Let me get a few more on here. I don't have enough wounds. Let's see here. Oh, we have some small ones here. Small ones are things you can kind of flick off quickly, like left the toilet seat up. So those are easily fixed. You just kind of, no, I don't want that in my life. Or your spouse will make sure that these get taken off and you're doing what you need to do. So we got here, misunderstood. You know, they didn't understand what I was really saying. Why did they push back on me? I don't get it. Rejection. You know, I went through when I was 25 years old, 24, 25 years old. I went through a massive corporate rejection from a church that I planted. And some of you were there. You know, you're still with me all these years later, but it was horrible. It was horrible. They gave me 13 pages of things that they felt needed to change, you know, in my life. I was overwhelmed with my weakness. And it got worse, you know, where I had to get up in front of the whole congregation and confess my inner sins of pride and all. And I got to tell you, I was in my 20s and I was arrogant, so they were right on many accounts. But the whole presentation, it was very wounding, it was difficult, and it suffered. And finally, I had to leave the church. I left the church, and here's the amazing thing is that church did well. Church prospered. And I was at a key point in my life because at this point now, you know, I've talked myself into a whole bunch of wounding, man. I've been corrected. There's correction right there. I got to read these. Things that were done to me. I've got those on here. Expectations were blown. Right? So I'm having to work through this thinking it was so overwhelming. It was like a ton of bricks that's put on top of you. Literally in this city in Brunswick, I was 24, 25 years old. I would roam around every day. They gave me a couple months severance, and I'm just roaming around every day. Like my friends have been separated. My church that I started had been separated. My whole future. Someone actually came to me when I was at that age and said, "What are you going to do with the rest of your life?" I'm like 24. And I believed him. I thought, that's right. What am I going to do the rest of my life? I'm already 24. I mean, that's the stuff that goes on in your head, man. You see you're in your promised land, but it doesn't feel like it. The walls have fallen, all right. They've fallen on you in the promised land. So you've got to get rid of this stuff. So the Lord took me through a soul journey. I had way more than these, though. Let me see. I don't have that, but I'll put it on there anyway. Crudeness. Let's see. Laughed at. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'll put that on here. It's a pink one. Not appreciated. I kind of feel that right now, actually. And let me see if there's any others here. Something someone said to me. Okay, get that there. I got more room. The accused of something. So I've got that in there. Now, how do you get rid of this? So I'm just telling you that the Lord worked on me. Some of these things you need to just get over. If you have the ability, by the free righteousness gift in God, so I give these a chance. It's like between me and God, I say, Lord, let's partner together. I want to clean up my act here. And so I look at some of these and I go, okay, this situation, I was misunderstood. They were probably just joking, or I actually misunderstood what they said, so I forgive them. Now here's the deal. I can put it over there. I've forgiven them before the Lord. I forgive Joel for what he said to me, you know. And then if I get with Joel and I feel like, I just can't help but think about that thing. I take it and I'll put it back on there. So sometimes you can forgive and, okay, I released it to Jesus, but it hasn't affected my heart yet. And there's some things that are weighty. In fact, the one I've got here. This is like, these are big wounds. These are life wounds. This is, I read a few of them down. Family, race, gender, abuse, sin, self-hate, poverty, physical disabilities, mental roadblocks, depression. Yeah. So you have all these things and it becomes a part of your life too. I don't know if this is going to work or not. And some walking around with a big wound and a bunch of small wounds. This is where a lot of believers are today. And they walk around hurt because there's no teaching and no training on how to forgive people, how to deal with situations and say, I'm done with it. Like this one, that guy that, I focused on one guy that caused me the great pain when I was in my early 20s. I moved to Canada, so I moved away and I thought, okay, I got rid of that. He got very popular in church world, in America and around the world actually. And so he'd keep coming back. He was there every time I'd see his face. We didn't have internet back then. So every time I'd see his face, I'd be like, okay, Lord, I forgive him. You know, talk about 70 times 7. I've been there. I've been there. My first year in Canada, every day I prayed for this guy. And here's the aggravating thing. I'd pray for him, and he got blessed. And the next day I'd be like, Lord, bless him. May he find you. I mean, your prayers are a little rough at first. Lord, show him the pain I'm feeling. May he feel, these, what they call them, imprecatory prayers. Yeah. Which David prayed, actually. May the hills fall on them. That's the word of the Lord. It's amazing the scriptures you find during a time like that you never noticed before. They apply so well, And so you pray daily. Well, after a year doing that every day, I'm praying for him. My heart, I'm not in his world, and so my heart is getting softened for him. And, he was not that much older than me. He's learning himself, and you're going through all these thoughts, and I forgave him. I forgave him 70 times 7, maybe 71 times 7. I forgave him. And so the big test came shortly after that, actually about 7 years after that, which was short in those days. 7 years later, I was in Toronto, away from where I lived in Eastern Canada. This guy's from America. We're having an amazing move of God in Toronto, thousands of people at this conference, Catch the Fire conference, of which I was a part of. 3,000 people meeting there. I'm so excited, like, woo, this is amazing, power of God, and I look over, and the guy who wounded me is in the front row on the other side. I ran and told Cindy, you won't believe who's here. And I told her, she goes, what? And sure enough, it was not only him, but his whole troop was there, And they were there, and they didn't see me yet, but they did finally see me eventually. And I don't have time to tell you about that, but I'm looking over there, and a friend of mine, Wes Campbell, goes over and starts ministering to this guy, the big guy, this one. He starts ministering to him, and I, in my heart, I'm like, all right, get it, man. Break that control spirit off of him and whatever else came through my mind, And I looked over there, and Wes, there's 3,000 people there. Wes looks over, he's looking around the crowd. He sees me looking over there, and he goes, and Wes is a friend of mine, so he goes like this. Come on. And I'm like, so I went over there, and the guy's there, being ministered to. Wes says, hey, I got to get back on the platform. Do you mind ministering to this guy? I said, okay. I've got some ministry. I laid my hands on him. The power of God hit him. He went on the floor, and I was sitting on the floor beside him, praying for him. And I'm praying just normal prayers. Lord, fill him. Lord, bless him. All those kinds of things, I really wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. And the Holy Spirit came over me because of the year of praying that I did. The abundance of grace came into my life, and I began to weep over him. Then my prayers became prophetic. I started praying into his future and the blessing of God and the favor of God to be upon him. And he had no idea who was praying for him. A little later, he did. He understood it. We had major reconciliation that took place over and over again. He just called me, actually, in February or March, and talking to him again. You can know when you're healed. It just doesn't matter. I mean, it's like that little thing inside that kind of clicks like, it's not there anymore because some of these things have to be dislodged. Some of them you're going to be able to easily remove in the presence of God. You're saying, I'm done with that. I'm not going to live that way anymore. But there's going to be some things that are pretty major. And you're going to have to say, God, I need grace for this. And some things he will take years to get you fully released. Not that you're not free, you're not released. I'm not saying any of that stuff. I'm just telling you that he comes back and actually tests you over and over again. He touches the sore spot. When I was 17 years old, I'll close with this, but when I was 17 years old, I stepped on a needle. I didn't know it. We had shag carpet back then. Thank God we don't have that anymore. I'm walking through the house barefooted. I'm 17 years old. I hit something sharp in the carpet. I looked at the bottom of my foot, and there was a little bloody spot there. And I thought, oh, that's weird. There was something in the carpet that, cut my foot. So I was working at a factory at the time. I went to the factory the next day. I worked 3 days, and every day my right leg got bigger and bigger. It was just swelling up. I thought, what in the world? I never made the connection between my foot, I thought I'd go to the doctor. So I go to the doctor's checking out. He said, do you have any cuts or anything now? I said, well, I stepped on something like, 3 or 4 days ago. And I showed him, and he goes, oh, mind if I take an x-ray? He takes an x-ray. I can hear him out in the hallway after the x-ray. This is, a while back. And I heard him talking to another doctor. He said, what do you got? I said, well, I've got this thing. Look at this. And he goes, oh, my gosh, you're looking at my foot, And the guy said, what are you going to do? And he says, well, I'm going to have to cut it out, Like I'm listening to this whole conversation. He said, but it's going to be kind of messy, to get in there because it's gone way up in, into his foot. And so discussing this, I thought, what in the world are they talking about? He comes in, he flips this thing up on the light. And I could see my foot, your lower leg and foot, and there's a needle. I can see the eye of the needle in my foot. The whole thing went up in my foot. And they had to cut my foot halfway open to get that thing out. And it's funny, for the first 3 or 4 years after it healed, if I step in a certain circumstance, I remember that event. I feel it in my foot. Now, all these years later, I can go anywhere. In fact, I can't tell you right now which one it was. I think it was right, but I'm not sure. But for a long time, I would walk, especially on sand. When I stepped on sand, it'd be like, whoa, I forgave him. I forgave him. It aligned with what was going on in my heart. So some of these things take time, and you've got to work this forgiveness into your heart. Why? Because we are taking a promised land called Steve Witt. And you're taking your promised land. And I want to get all these things. I don't want any more of these things hanging around in my life. Let's all stand together if you could. Yeah, I'm way over. Come on up. Joel, you coming up? Jesus tells us, it's interesting, in one scripture, Matthew 18, he says, if someone has aught against you, go to them and be reconciled. Or if you've been hurt, go to them, be reconciled. In Matthew 5, it says, if you come to the altar and you know that somebody has something against you, leave your gift, go to them, be reconciled, and then come back. In other words, when you've hurt somebody, you need to be the initiator of reconciliation. When someone hurts you, you need to be initiator of reconciliation. That's just not fair, is it? No matter what happened, if it's sticking in your heart, you got a little clothespin on you, you need to go deal with it. And you need to ask them. If you wounded them, don't say, I apologize. Sometimes I say stupid things. You ask for forgiveness. When you do that, you humble yourself. You say, would you forgive me? And usually most people are like, oh, no, don't even worry. I need anything. No, it's important to me. It's important to me. Would you forgive me for this? And most times they'll say yes. And if they don't, you're kind of released. You're released. You just keep releasing it to the Lord. And he's going to begin to deal with the deep things in your life. And you're going to feel the fresh air. It's like what's happening in the black community right now. I believe that this is being removed. Out of white people's hearts, or anyone who's been judgmental or prejudicial, out of the wound that's in the black heart that is national, that is worldwide really. There's something going on now that is so amazing. So why do we have to keep talking about this? Like, okay, we dealt it. Shouldn't we deal with it and just move on? Maybe with one of these small ones over here, but this is big. You guys pay attention to this. Could take years to rebuild and restore relationship with the African American community. So what we need to do, we need to talk about it. We need to listen. We need to change our minds, change our hearts, and change our actions. It's called repentance. So I yield it to you right now. If you just close your eyes before the Lord, Joel's going to lead us in some ministry here.